Chris Karpman, SunDevilSource.com, has had a busy last few, of course, weeks because of what's happening with the Pac-12, and now Arizona State a part of the Big 12 next year, and then the self-imposed bowl ban. He joins Craig and Paul. I'm David Smoak on 365 Sports. Chris, were the reasonings that I saw on your timeline earlier today on Twitter, is that enough, in your opinion, for what they did by the self-imposed bowl ban?
Well, they should have taken the bowl ban last year. I think it was pretty obvious at the time that they were headed toward having to have a postseason where they weren't able to compete. Like that, we knew that. Like I reported a year and a half ago that Herm Edwards personally participated in the impermissible recruiting on ASU's campus and other locations of multiple recruits, and the staff collectively more than 24 prospects, and a former staff member paid for the travel of one of these recruits. Other prospects had their travel paid for by other people representing the program. And there's a very significant amount of rule breaking that took place, and ASU was aware of all of this literally, a year and a half or more ago, maybe even 2 years ago in a lot of cases. And they, for whatever reason, they dragged their feet. Maybe they thought that they'd be able to wiggle their way out of this. But a lot of the decisions that have been made have just been terrible. Like, for example, they could have fired Herm Edwards for cause. Instead, they gave him a $4.4 million, which was half of his remaining contract. They could have tried to do what Tennessee did in recent months, which was pay a fine, a significant fine, $8 or $9 million by Tennessee, in lieu of a 2-year bowl ban. That was like the average SEC bowl payout amount. ASU could have taken the $4.4 million it gave to Herm Edwards and then tried to use that along with more rigorous sanctions on the front end last year that wouldn't have saddled Kenny Dillingham or his team and all these new players from a bowl ban. And I don't know for sure if that would have happened, but I mean, nobody thought ASU was going to have a good year last year, and they could have just done all this stuff last year.
Chris, what do you think this means, the way that this has been handled for Ray Anderson's long-term future in that job? He's had a rough couple of years, to say the least.
Right. So his contract runs through February of 2026. Got 2.5 more years. There's nothing right now that makes it appear that he's in jeopardy of losing his job. Now, I will say that I have heard from more prominent boosters expressing dissatisfaction and a desire to see ASU go in a different way with its leadership in the last couple of days than any time previously. I think people are fed up. They realize that giving him the benefit of the doubt was probably not the smart thing. And when you're trying to win and establish a foundation under a new coaching regime like Kenny Dillingham, you need money to flow in from your prominent boosters, both directly to your program and also in terms of NIL. And there's a lot of money that I think is going to stay on the sidelines right now due to the lack of confidence in the leadership. And that is a very serious thing. And perhaps if that becomes clearly understood by Michael Crow, the degree that this is impacting the program, how much money, I mean, there could be some evolution of perspective on his behalf, but he's been such an ardent supporter of Ray Anderson that I think I wrote like 10 months ago, Ray Anderson should have already been fired previously, and things just keep getting worse.
Chris, I think you kind of touched on it, but just to clarify, any idea, I mean, because the actual decision's still not out there yet, and as you mentioned, it's been an ongoing investigation, but any idea if this is something that's close and that's why they decided, hey, we might as well put it out there, and if you're going to skip a bowl game, if you were going to make a bowl game, you had to kind of announce that before the season, but is there any sign that the NCAA is close to their investigation being done with the Sun Devils?
Yes. That is definitely tethered to what just happened.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people know that for forever it's been you get a notice of allegations, then you respond to that, and then there's a process that comes to the conclusion of the investigation and the penalties. It's different now. ASU is in a bifurcated case. Basically, they make proposals to the Committee on Infractions that then either are viewed to be sufficient or insufficient to bring this thing to a conclusion. Tennessee's case took, I believe, at least 3 times of going back and forth over a period of months before they were able to come to the conclusion. But ASU already has had this dialogue with the Committee on Infractions, understood the serious nature of what has been found as part of the investigative process, and the self-imposing of a bull ban is with all of that knowledge and understanding that that wasn't avoidable, or ASU was going to have to pay some enormous amount of money, try to get out of that bull ban. And ASU doesn't have a lot of money right now. It's very significantly underwater, which ironically is due to a lot of decisions that have been made with coaches and buyouts.
So you made it clear in that I guess the way that the bullet points that the first thing I thought about, and we discussed this yesterday, is, well, wait a minute, this isn't fair to the players. They can't transfer. But they couldn't have transferred. The window was April of 2023. Well, you think any of them would have gotten a waiver had this been, let's say, announced 2 or 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, maybe even late July?
Well, I'm confident that some of them would have pursued that and tried. Yeah, it's true. Like the entering the transfer portal window had closed, but the NCAA committee on this has tended to give leeway when programs have sanctions. So the timing of it really kind of looks like they were trying to lock everybody in with classes already starting a week and a half or so earlier, and to be able to not lose players from their roster. I'm not saying that was intentionally what they decided to do, and I can't report anything like that. But that, of course, is how it's going to look. That's what a lot of people in the media have said. John Wilner and others I've seen have talked about the timing of this being really suspicious and something that is very negative for the athletes. And I can't disagree with that. It's just another indicator of how poorly managed that ASU has been through all of these major situations.
Kenny Dillingham was hot about it, and I thought his response was great yesterday, Chris, that you guys let us use. You just hired him. He's an alum. He's trying to make things great going forward. They've got this great news in that, I don't know if it's great news, but look, they got Jaden Rashad, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, to come. He's going to start the first game. They've got all this good news, and then here you have this bad news, and you've put your probably the most talked about head coach you've had in a little while coming to Arizona State, all this buzz, and you just rained all over it before he even gets started.
I mean, just terrible. Now, we had one video clip alone in one tweet get like 600,000 views in 48 hours. Which, I mean, that shows you, like, there's a lot of people paying attention to what's going on here. And he said he found out at 6:30 in the morning on a Sunday, which was less than 2 hours before they practiced. Now, that is really bad. Like, it's the first practice of a game week. There's no way that they're going to go out there and have a good practice immediately after that. And so the timing of it certainly wasn't discussed with Dillingham about when they would release it, because he didn't find out until that morning. And that really is another sort of thing that shows a lack of consideration for all the perspectives that they need to be incorporating into their decision-making process. Let's just contrast this, if you guys want, with Kalen DeBoer at Washington's coach. He was so involved in the realignment that a lot of reporting is that he was the central figure, because he didn't want to not be on linear TV, that precipitated Washington and Oregon moving to the Big Ten. So that is a much bigger and broader thing that Washington's coach is very involved in. And then you have a new coach, Kenny Dillingham, who doesn't even get told or asked or anything about any of this until he just finds out 2 hours before they start their first practice of their first game week.
And we know a new coach in Boulder, Colorado would have been notified as well if any major decisions like that were going on. So, yeah, that's something for Arizona State fans in Dillingham to not be too happy about for sure. Chris, in terms of Rashad being the guy, the QB1 to start the season, just, I guess, what's been the reaction and what were kind of your thoughts? Was that a foregone conclusion at this point, or, how did you kind of break down that decision?
Yeah, so he joined ASU only a day or two before spring ball started. He wasn't close to the other quarterbacks in spring ball. And then even at the beginning of August, the first week and a half to 2 weeks of preseason camp, he wasn't even getting any first or second team reps because it was Drew Pine, Trenton Bourget. But then Pine suffered a hamstring injury at Camp Conazona in their scrimmage in the middle of the month. And all of a sudden, Rashad gets these reps, and then Bourget had a really bad week subsequent to that, including a scrimmage that was maybe his worst practice. And Rashad's development was like leaps and bounds, really, throughout August. And then it was like, okay, like, what are we going to do? This is the most talented quarterback we have by far. Long term, like, he's going to be the guy. Should we just decide to throw him out there and go with him right now? And I think one of the reasons that the answer was a yes was he has a big play capability that the other options don't have. And then we saw that with his arm talent in yesterday's practice, where, I mean, it was like a howitzer was out there. It was the best practice that we've seen of any of the quarterbacks this year. He threw 5 or 6 long touchdowns, including 1 or 2 against the first team defense and several others against the scout team. And I thought that when they narrowed the playbook, he started to flourish more and more as they get ready for their games. And so the decision would have been a surprise like 3 weeks ago, but then the way that things evolved quickly between then and now, it became not really that much of a surprise.
Chris, perhaps this is a little bit too aggressive of the question, but Dillingham's pissed. I mean, he's livid, and he has every right to feel that way, but this is his first opportunity. Is there any way that this could damage his relationship with the school?
I think that's to be determined, really. You keep in mind, like, the things that everybody saw was right after he had basically yelled at the team for not competing as hard as he expects them to, regardless of the circumstances. Like, you control your own effort and your attitude. People always know that's something that's widely said. And he ripped them with that message. And then he came over and he was very angry because I think he just didn't want that to be the way that their first game week started. And presumably, like, the fact that he wasn't clued in or none of this was discussed with him also was upsetting. Now, he had some positive things to say about Ray Anderson yesterday at his first weekly press conference of the season, and said that his relationship has been good with him, and there's no issues, is what he said there as it relates directly with him. Now, maybe that's partly politics. Maybe that's partly trying to recenter after what had happened the prior day. I'm not exactly sure on that, but I do think that moving forward, it's an important relationship to watch. Dillingham needs a structure to be provided to him from the athletic department that creates an environment that makes it easier for him to be successful. And I think objectively, that hasn't happened nearly to the degree that it should, and that is one of the things that's led ASU fans and prominent boosters to be so unhappy right now.
All right, Chris, you've done a great job with both what was happening with Arizona State and what was going to happen with the Big 12, which it did, and then also with this story, too, involving the Sun Devils' self-imposed bowl ban. Thank you very much for your time, and maybe it gets to normal once they start playing games this weekend.
One can hope, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you. Chris Karpman. His video